Today's story is so raw and unsettling it might leave you holding your breath. Set deep in the lawless Old West, where survival meant hard hearts and harder choices. This was a place where prejudice ruled louder than the law, and where fate collided at the edge of a frozen street. It all began with one small moment, a man stepping forward when everyone else stepped back, and that single act would light a fire no one could put out. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The wind tore through the tight streets of Cedar Ridge, flinging dust and icy sleet hard enough to sting like broken glass against bare skin. February of 1873 showed no mercy to the frontier town, least of all to those without walls, fires, or a place to hide. Elowyn Pike flattened herself against the weather-beaten boards of Morrison's general store, chasing what little shelter the building could offer. Her dress, once a decent brown wool fit for a working woman, now clung to her in shredded layers. Mud crusted the hem from weeks on the road, and the sleeves were split and torn from sleeping in brush and crawling through thorns. She had walked 3 straight days to reach Cedar Ridge, her last coins traded for stale bread 2 towns back. "Please," she called to a woman passing by, wrapped head to toe in thick furs. "I'm looking for work. Any kind of work. I can clean, cook, tend animals." The woman tightened her shawl and moved on without so much as a glance. It was the same answer Elowyn had received all morning. Her stomach twisted painfully with hunger, but she forced herself to ignore it. Pride was a luxury she'd burned through long ago. She drifted toward the saloon, where several men stood smoking beneath the awning. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said, her voice raw from cold and wind. "I'm looking for employment. I'll sleep in the barn. Just give me work." "I don't need much." "Well, would you look at that?" one man muttered, heavy-set with tobacco-yellowed teeth, nudging his friend. "Another beggar woman. Town's crawling with 'em lately." "Probably got herself into trouble," another added, eyeing Elowyn's bare hands. "No decent woman travels alone." "I'm a widow," Elowyn said softly, half a lie. Callum Pike had abandoned her, not died, but in places like this, desertion carried a worse shame than death. "Sure you are," the first man laughed. "And I'm President Grant. Move along. We don't need your kind here." Heat flooded Elowyn's face despite the freezing air. She turned away, blinking hard before tears could freeze on her lashes. Across the street, the livery stable caught her eye. Maybe the owner there would show more mercy. Inside, the air was warmer, thick with hay and horse sweat. She found the proprietor, a grizzled man shoveling muck. "Sir, I'm looking for work," she said. "I'm strong. I can clean stalls, feed horses. I'll sleep in the barn. I don't need wages, just food and shelter." The man barely looked up. "Can't help you. Already got a stable boy. And it wouldn't be proper, a woman sleeping in my barn. Folks would talk." "They already do," Elowyn said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Please, I have nowhere else." "Not my concern." He returned to his work, dismissing her as if she were dust. Elowyn stumbled back into the street. The storm had worsened, numbing her fingers until she could hardly feel them. Fighting the wind, she headed for the church at the edge of town. Surely there, of all places, she would find mercy. But Orrin Blackwell stood in the doorway, arms folded. "I'm sorry," he said coldly, "but we can't take in every stray that wanders through. Church funds are reserved for our congregation." "I'll join," Elowyn said quickly. "I'll attend every service. Without a proper home or family?" He shook his head. "I think not. Perhaps you should return to wherever you came from." There was nowhere left to return to. There was nowhere left for her to go. Benton Pike had made that clear the moment he learned that Callum Pike had walked away from his marriage. "No daughter of mine will carry that kind of disgrace," he'd said, shutting the door in her face without hesitation. Elowyn Pike drifted back toward the center of town, her steps slow and unsteady. The cold had sunk deep into her bones, dulling her thoughts until everything felt distant and unreal. She'd once heard that freezing to death was quiet, that it felt like falling asleep. Maybe that wouldn't be the worst way to end things. A knot of people had gathered near the general store, their raised voices slicing through the wind. Elowyn moved toward the sound without thinking. "I don't care if he trades here regular," someone was saying. "Those Indians got no right walking our streets like they own 'em." Pushing closer, Elowyn saw what had drawn the crowd. A man stood near the store's entrance, unlike anyone she had ever seen. He rose over the others, close to 7 feet tall, broad-shouldered and solid as a timber post. His hair was coal black, worn long in the Apache style, framing a face carved from hard lines and shadow. His clothing was a blend of worlds: leather leggings, a thick wool coat, boots worn smooth by miles of travel. But it was his eyes that stole Elowyn's breath. Dark as a winter sky, they moved slowly over the crowd, with a look that seemed to weigh everything and find it unimportant. When that gaze passed over her, something struck her hard. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. She couldn't name it. Joseph Burns caught him looking at his daughter. A woman hissed loudly. These savages got no control over themselves. The Apache man, because that was clearly what he was, did not react. He stood perfectly still, like a mountain that had wandered into town and decided to stay a while. The hostility rolled over him without effect, as if the insults were nothing more than wind. Elowyn found herself watching him closely. His clothes were clean, well kept. His hands, visible beneath his coat sleeves, were scarred with the marks of labor, but steady and calm. This was no drifter, no troublemaker. This was a man who had come into town for supplies, no different from anyone else. "Someone ought to run him off," a voice muttered from the crowd. "You want to try, Harold?" Another replied, followed by uneasy laughter. "Look at the size of him." Elowyn swayed where she stood. Hunger and cold finally claimed their due. She reached for a hitching post to steady herself, but her numb fingers slipped. The world tilted. She never hit the ground. Strong arms caught her, holding her upright with unexpected care. Dazed, she lifted her eyes and found herself staring into those dark depths. Up close, she saw they weren't black at all, but a deep brown, like rich earth after rain. The crowd fell silent. The Apache man studied her briefly, taking in her torn dress, her pale, frost-bitten skin, the exhaustion etched into every line of her. Without speaking, he adjusted his hold, one arm firm around her back, the other sliding beneath her knees. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing. "Put her down," someone shouted. "You can't just—" The man's gaze swept the crowd again. Something in it made them step back. Not fear exactly, but the instinctive understanding that some things could not be moved. He walked on, carrying Elowyn Pike through the parting crowd. She knew she should protest, demand to be released, but the warmth of his body was the first real heat she'd felt in days, and without meaning to, she leaned closer. "Where's he taking her?" Voices followed. "Someone stop him." "You stop him then." No one did. They watched, shocked and transfixed, as the towering Apache carried the ragged white woman away. Elowyn's last clear thought before exhaustion dragged her under was the scent of his coat. Wood smoke and pine, clean, steady, and real. The scent of wood smoke and pine clung to him, clean and grounding, the kind of smell that pulled Elowyn Pike back to memories of better days, of a home that had existed before everything unraveled. She let her head rest against his shoulder, and, for the first time in weeks, allowed herself to stop resisting the world. Behind them, the crowd erupted into angry whispers and sharp speculation, but the Apache man never turned around. He moved forward with steady resolve through the storm, carrying his unexpected burden as if fate itself had timed this moment, this woman, perfectly on a bitter February day in Cedar Ridge. The wind still howled, but Eowyn no longer heard it. Exhaustion pulled her under, easing her into the first true sleep she'd known since her life collapsed. She was borne along by a stranger whose kindness came without explanation, without demand, without judgment. In Cedar Ridge, people would talk about this day for years, the day the Apache giant carried off the beggar woman, the day their carefully ordered world was shaken by a single, wordless act of mercy. But for Eowyn Pike, it was simply the day her life began again. She woke to warmth and the low crackle of fire. For a moment she lay still, disoriented. Her last clear memory was the street spinning, then strong arms catching her before darkness took hold. Slowly, she opened her eyes and studied her surroundings. She was inside a cabin, simple, solid, and well-built. Thick log walls were sealed tight against the cold. A fire burned steadily in a stone hearth, its glow throwing soft, restless shadows across the room. She lay on a pallet near the fire, wrapped in layered blankets scented with sage and wood smoke. Across from her sat the Apache man. He was working quietly with his hands. In the firelight she could see him more clearly now, perhaps mid-30s, with high cheekbones and a strong, uncompromising jaw. His hands moved with calm precision, shaping a piece of wood. When she shifted, trying to sit up, he glanced over and set the carving aside. "Water," he said, his voice low and even. It wasn't a question. He stood, brought her a cup, and helped her rise just enough to drink. The water was cool and clean, better than anything she could remember tasting in weeks. She emptied the cup and swallowed hard. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice rough and thin. He nodded and turned to a pot hanging above the fire. The scent drifting from it made her stomach tighten painfully. He ladled out stew and brought the bowl to her. Her hands trembled as she accepted it. The first spoonful burned tears into her eyes. It was plain food, venison, root vegetables, wild herbs, but after days of near starvation, it tasted rich beyond words. He watched her eat with dark, thoughtful eyes before returning to his carving. As she ate, Eowyn studied him, trying to understand what had driven him to help her. In town, he'd been met with suspicion and open contempt, yet he had shown her more decency than anyone there. When she finished, she asked quietly, "Why?" He looked up. "Why what? Why did you help me?" He was silent for a long moment. "You needed help." That was all. It struck her then how simple it was for him. He hadn't asked about her past, her reputation, or the choices that had left her alone and desperate. She needed help, so he gave it. "They'll talk," she said softly, "in town. They'll say terrible things about you, about me." "They already say terrible things," he replied, without anger or resentment. Eowyn stared down at her hands, still wrapped around the empty bowl. "I have nothing," she said, her voice breaking. "No money, no family. I can't repay you. I should go. You've been kind, but—" "Storm," he said, nodding toward the door. Only then did she register the wind again, rattling the shutters hard enough to shake the walls. "Stay tonight," he continued. "Decide tomorrow." And for the first time since the road had taken everything from her, Eowyn believed tomorrow might actually exist. He stood and gently took the bowl from her hands, carrying it to a wash basin near the wall. Elowin Pike watched him as he moved through the small cabin with quiet purpose. Nothing was wasted. Tools hung neatly on pegs, supplies were lined along shelves, and split firewood was stacked clean and ready by the hearth. The place felt lived in, orderly, safe. "What's your name?" she asked. He glanced back at her. "They call me Nakoa." After a brief pause, he added, "In white men's towns, that's enough. And your true name?" A faint smile touched his mouth, gone almost as soon as it appeared. "That one is for my people." "I'm Elowin," she said. "Elowin Pike." He nodded once, accepting it without question. As the evening settled in, Elowin found her tension slowly easing. Despite the strangeness of it all, Nakoa returned to his carving, working in silence, occasionally feeding another log into the fire. She realized he had set her pallet closest to the hearth, while he remained on a simple stool nearby. "I could sleep in the barn," she offered quietly. "I don't mind. I've slept in worse places." He shook his head. "No barn?" He gestured to the cabin around them. "This." "Then where will you sleep?" she asked. He pointed to a rolled bed near the wall. "There." "I've slept in worse places too," he said evenly. Outside, the wind howled louder, rattling the walls. Despite the fire's warmth, Elowin shivered and pulled the blankets tighter, her thoughts drifting back to the crowd's hostile faces and whispered judgments. "They think you're dangerous," she said softly. "I am," Nakoa replied, without pride or threat. "To anyone who would harm what is mine." The words made her pause. "Am I yours now?" she asked before she could stop herself. He met her gaze then, his dark eyes unreadable. "You belong to no one," he said. "But under my roof, you are under my protection." Her vision blurred. Protection? When was the last time anyone had offered her that? "My husband left me," she said suddenly. 8 months ago, just walked away, left debts behind, no money, nothing. Her voice faltered. "My father, Benton Pike, said I'd shamed the family, said a woman who couldn't keep her husband was no daughter of his." The words spilled out, unstoppable. "I tried to find work, but small towns talk. Everywhere I went, they already knew. I was the woman whose husband chose the road over her." Nakoa's hands kept moving, but she knew he was listening. "I thought Cedar Ridge would be different," she went on. "Bigger town, more people. I thought someone might need help badly enough not to care about my past." She gave a hollow laugh. "But it's the same everywhere." She stared at the fire. "A woman alone is either pitied or suspected. Never just accepted. White men's ways," Nakoa said after a moment. "In my people's way, a woman alone is not shameful. Sometimes it is necessary." He paused. "Sometimes it is strength." "I don't feel strong," Elowin said. "I walked 3 days through a storm. No food, no shelter." "Still standing," he replied. He shrugged slightly. "That is strength." She considered that in silence. She had never thought of desperation as courage. "What will people say?" she asked quietly. "A white woman staying with an Apache man." "They will say whatever they wish," he said. "Their words change nothing." "They could cause trouble for you." "They could try." There was something final in his tone, calm, certain, that made her believe him. This was a man who had faced trouble before and endured. A violent gust slammed into the cabin, shaking the walls. Elowin hugged the blankets tighter, grateful for the solid logs surrounding her. Nakoa rose and checked the door, securing the bar firmly in place. "Tomorrow," he said. "If the storm breaks, I go to town. Trade pelts." The fire crackled on, holding back the cold, as Elowyn Pike lay sheltered for the first time in far too long. "You decide," Nakoa said calmly. "Stay or go." "And if I stay?" Elowyn Pike asked. He returned to his stool and picked up the piece of wood he'd been carving. "Then you stay." "But what would I do?" she pressed. "I need to work. I have to earn my keep." "There is plenty of work," he replied, without looking up. "The garden needs tending. Clothes need mending. Game needs dressing." He glanced at her briefly. "If you want work." Something stirred in her chest, small, fragile, but alive. Hope. She hadn't felt it in months. "Yes," she said quickly. "Yes, I want to work." He nodded once, as if that settled everything, and went back to carving. They sat together in a quiet that felt almost companionable while the storm battered the cabin walls. Warm and fed for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Elowyn drifted in and out of sleep. Just before rest claimed her fully, she heard Nakoa moving about, banking the fire, securing the room, unrolling his bed. "Thank you," she whispered into the dark. Sleep was his only answer. Elowyn closed her eyes, listening to the wind howl outside and the soft crackle of embers settling. She thought of the people in town, their sharp tongues and colder hearts. They had warned her about the dangerous savage, yet here she was, safer than she'd been in months, treated with more dignity than any of them had shown her. Tomorrow she would have to decide. Return to Cedar Ridge and face their judgment. Move on to another place where she'd be nothing more than a beggar again. Or stay here, in this modest cabin, with a man who asked no questions, passed no judgment, and offered only shelter and honest work. But tonight, she didn't have to choose. Tonight, she could rest, warm, fed, and protected while the storm raged beyond the walls. For now, that was enough. As sleep finally took her, her last thought was of Nakoa's hands as he carved. Steady, patient, shaping something meaningful from raw wood. Maybe broken things could be reshaped, she thought drowsily. Maybe she could be too. The wind continued its assault on the cabin, but inside, two souls found quiet refuge, one who offered shelter without being asked, and one who had nearly forgotten such kindness still existed in the world. Morning arrived wrapped in silence. The storm had passed, leaving the land buried beneath fresh white snow. Elowyn woke slowly, confused for a moment by the unfamiliar warmth and comfort. Then memory returned. Nakoa, the cabin, the mercy she'd believed long extinct. She pushed herself upright and looked around. He was already awake, standing near the window, studying the snow-covered ground. In the pale morning light, the cabin revealed itself more clearly. Spare, orderly, everything placed with care. Tools hung neatly from pegs. Furs and blankets were folded along the walls. A rifle stood in the corner, cleaned and ready. "Good morning," she said softly. He turned and nodded. "Morning. Coffee?" "Yes, please." He poured from a pot warming by the fire and handed her a tin cup. The coffee was strong and bitter, but the heat was welcome. She drank deeply. "The storm's gone," he said. "Trail to town should clear by afternoon." Her stomach tightened. The choice she'd avoided last night now stood squarely before her. She took another sip, gathering her thoughts. She stopped. How could she explain the war inside her? Part of her knew she should leave, try again somewhere else, but the larger part, the part worn thin by running, begging, and being judged, wanted to stay. Nakoa moved around the cabin, preparing breakfast with the same quiet efficiency she'd noticed before. Every action deliberate. He set a plate in front of her, fried bread and dried meat. Simple food, but her mouth watered. "Thank you," she said, meaning far more than the meal. They ate in silence. As she chewed, Eowyn studied the cabin again, trying to imagine herself here. It was nothing like the life she'd known, but for the first time in a long while, it felt real. There was no fine furniture, no decoration beyond a handful of items that looked ceremonial, hanging quietly on one wall. Yet the cabin was warm, solid, safe. And for the first time in months, Eowyn Pike was being treated with simple respect. "If I stay," she asked suddenly, "what will people in town say? What will they do?" Nakoa considered the question. "They will talk," he said at last. "They always talk, maybe make threats." He shrugged slightly. "And then nothing. This is my land, my business. But they could cause trouble for you." "My trading?" he asked. "I have traded with them 10 years. They need my furs, my meat. Business is business." Eowyn thought about that. Even yesterday, despite their open hostility, no one had stopped him from trading. They needed what he brought, even if they hated him for who he was. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she admitted, "to face their judgment." "I'm not asking you to face them," he replied. "I'm asking if you want work, a roof, food." He gestured around the cabin. "This is not town." Understanding settled over her then. He wasn't asking her to endure their stares and whispers every day. The cabin stood alone, likely miles from Cedar Ridge. Here she could have shelter, honest labor, dignity, without judgment pressing in on her from every side. "Yes," she said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "I want to stay." He nodded, as though he had expected nothing else. "Good. Much work to do." He showed her around then, explaining the rhythms of his days. Water came from a spring behind the cabin, protected by a small spring house he had built himself. Firewood was stacked beneath a lean-to. A root cellar held vegetables and preserved meat. A small shed stored tools and supplies. "The garden is there," he said, pointing toward a cleared patch now buried under snow. "Come spring, it needs planting. You know garden work?" "Yes," Eowyn said quickly. "I had a kitchen garden." Her voice faltered, back when she had a home, a husband, a life. "Yes, I know gardening." "Good. Trapline also needs checking," he continued. "I can teach you to skin and prepare pelts." She nodded, even though the thought turned her stomach. She had asked for work. She wouldn't turn away from it now. The day passed faster than she expected. Nakoa showed her where everything belonged, explained his methods. There was order in the cabin. Clear, deliberate, thoughtful. This wasn't a crude shelter. It was a carefully kept home. As afternoon wore on, he prepared to leave for town. "I need supplies," he said, pulling on his heavy coat. "Back before dark." "Is there anything I should do while you're gone?" she asked. "Rest," he said. "You're still weak from cold and hunger. Work can wait until tomorrow." He paused at the door and looked back. "Bar the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone." A chill slid down her spine. "Are you expecting trouble?" "No," he said evenly, "but caution is wise." After he left, Eowyn did as he instructed, sliding the heavy bar into place. The cabin felt different without him, smaller, yet oddly larger in his absence. She moved slowly through the space, growing familiar with what might become her home. Home. The word felt strange on her tongue. She noticed the carving he'd worked on the night before resting on a shelf. A bird, wings spread in mid-flight. The detail was remarkable, each feather shaped with care. She traced it gently with her fingers, awed by the patience and skill it must have taken. Maybe, she thought quietly, Broken things could still be shaped into something whole. Time moved slowly after Nakoa left. Elowyn Pike tended the fire, feeding it carefully, then carried water to wash herself properly for the first time in weeks. The warmth stung her skin, but she welcomed the pain. She found a small, cracked mirror and flinched at her reflection. Her face was hollowed by hunger, her hair knotted and dull with dirt. She looked exactly like what she had been, a woman worn down by the road and the cold. She was working a comb through the worst of the tangles when the sound of horses reached her ears. Her heart lurched. She moved to the window and peered out cautiously. 3 riders had stopped in the yard. She recognized one immediately. Garrick Vey, the deputy from town. The other 2 were strangers, but their posture told her enough, the way their eyes swept over the cabin, measuring it. "Hello in the house," Vey called. "We know you're in there, woman." Elowyn stayed silent, Nakoa's warning echoing in her mind. "We saw the Apache ride out for town," Vey went on. "Come on out. We're here to help you. Take you back to civilization where you belong." Her hands shook, but she didn't answer. "Don't be foolish," he said sharply. "You think that savage means you any good? You're nothing but a plaything to him. Come out now while you still can." "Go away," Elowyn called, startled by the steadiness in her own voice. "I'm fine where I am." "You don't know what you're saying," one of the other men shouted. "They've got ways of twisting a woman's mind." "I know exactly what I'm saying," she replied. "Now leave. This is private property." Vey laughed, harsh and mocking. "Property? You think the law recognizes an Indian's claim to land? Open that door, or we'll open it for you." Her thoughts raced. The door was solid, barred, but 3 determined men could break it eventually. She moved toward the rifle resting where Nakoa kept it, then froze. She didn't know how to use it. Even if she did, could she pull the trigger? "Last chance," Vey warned. "Come peaceful." A rifle shot cracked through the air, not from inside the cabin. The horses reared and danced nervously. "That's far enough, gentlemen." Elowyn knew the voice instantly, though there was an edge to it she hadn't heard before. "Nakoa." "Now hold on," Vey said quickly. "We're just trying to help the lady. She's clearly not in her right mind, staying out here with—" "She has made her choice," Nakoa said evenly. "You will respect it." "Or what?" Vey sneered. "You'll shoot a deputy? That's a hanging offense, boy." "Self-defense is no crime," Nakoa replied. "You are on my land, threatening my guest. Leave. Now." Elowyn looked through the window again. Nakoa stood at the edge of the clearing, rifle steady in his hands. Even from here, she could see the calm certainty in his stance. This was no bluff. "This isn't over," Vey spat. "We've got laws about white women and Indians, moral laws, if not legal ones. You're corrupting her, and the good people of Cedar Ridge won't stand for it." "The good people of Cedar Ridge let her starve in their streets," Nakoa said. "Their morality means nothing here." The words landed hard. Vey's face flushed with anger, but he turned his horse. "You'll regret this," he said. "Both of you." They rode off, and Elowyn sagged against the wall, her legs trembling as relief washed through her. Moments later, she heard Nakoa's footsteps. She rushed to unbar the door. He entered, set his rifle back in its place, and studied her quietly with those dark eyes. "You stayed," he said. "You told me to bar the door and not open it for anyone." A faint smile touched his mouth. "Good." He carried a pack, which he set on the table. "Supplies," he said. Then he pulled out a folded bundle. "And this. For you. The dress needs mending, but it's warm." Elowyn unfolded the fabric. It was a simple wool dress, plain, sturdy, and carefully made. and for the first time in a long while, she felt not like a burden, but like someone worth protecting. Her eyes filled, spilling over despite her effort to hold them back. "I can't pay you." "I already said," Nakoa replied evenly. "I'm not asking for payment, but—" "You need clothes for winter," he continued, as if explaining something obvious. "This is practical." Elowyn Pike clutched the dress against her chest, her fingers tightening in the wool. After months of cruelty, of being looked through or turned away, even this simple act of care felt almost unbearable. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "Maybe. Probably." He continued unpacking the rest of the supplies without concern. Flour, salt, coffee, ammunition. "Changes nothing." She watched him, then asked the question that had been weighing on her since he carried her from the street. "Why are you doing this? Truly?" He paused, his hands stilling over the open pack. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he spoke. "Long ago," he said, "my mother was cast out by her people. She married a white trapper against tribal law. When he died, she had nowhere to go." Elowyn's breath caught. "No one would help her," he went on. "Not Apache, not white. She starved to death when I was 12 winters old." Her chest tightened painfully. "I'm so sorry." "It was not your doing," he said simply. "But I remember." His voice remained steady, though something deeper moved beneath it. "I remember how they looked at her, like she was nothing. I remember begging anyone to help." He resumed unpacking as though he had spoken of the weather. "You needed help. I could give it." Simple words. But Elowyn knew it wasn't simple at all. Nothing about this was. And yet, sitting in that warm cabin with this quiet man who demanded nothing from her but honest work, she felt a peace she hadn't known in years. "Thank you," she said again, knowing the words could never be enough. He nodded, understanding anyway. "Tomorrow, work begins. Tonight, rest. Real rest." As evening settled in, they shared another modest meal. Elowyn thought about the men who had come, their threats, their accusations. She thought of Cedar Ridge, where she had been nothing but a beggar woman, an embarrassment to be erased or ignored. Here she was a guest. Tomorrow she would be a worker. Perhaps one day she might be something more. For now, this was enough. The cabin, the quiet, this unexpected refuge with a man who understood what it meant to live on the outside, looking in. 2 weeks passed in relative peace. Elowyn eased into the rhythm of cabin life, finding comfort in the routines Nakoa had long established. She mended clothes, prepared meals, and learned to check the simpler trap lines near the cabin. Her hands, once soft from another life, grew rough and capable. The whispers began during Nakoa's next trip into town for supplies. He returned later than usual that evening, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. He set his pack down harder than necessary. "What happened?" Elowyn asked, lifting her head from the rabbit pelt she was learning to scrape. "Nothing of importance," he said. But the tension in his jaw told another story. She didn't push. She had learned that Nakoa shared only when he was ready. Over dinner, he finally spoke. "They are calling you names in town." Her hand froze around her cup. "What kind of names?" "It doesn't matter," he said. "Words of small, frightened people." Then he looked directly at her. "But you should know." She swallowed. "Tell me." "They say you'd sleep anywhere for food," he said quietly. "Like an animal, like something kept in a barn." There were other things he didn't say, but she understood. Heat rose in her face, sharp and sudden. Not anger, shame. And that, she realized, hurt far worse. Because hadn't she said it herself? Hadn't she begged to sleep in barns, anywhere she could lie down without freezing? They were calling her a ruined woman now, saying no decent man would have her, especially living with an Apache. "They're not wrong," Elowyn Pike said quietly. "I am ruined. My husband left me. My family cast me out." Her voice trembled, but she went on. "I begged in their streets, and now I'm living with a man who isn't my husband. By their standards, I am ruined." Nakoa's eyes flared with sudden heat. "Their standards mean nothing," he said sharply. "You work hard. You harm no one. That is not ruin." But the damage had already begun. The fragile piece of peace she'd found started to splinter. She caught herself thinking about the people in town, imagining their whispers, their knowing looks. When she glanced at her reflection in the small mirror, she saw what they must see: a fallen woman, someone stripped of dignity, judged and found wanting. The next day confirmed it. Elowyn was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching. Her heart sank as she recognized several women from Cedar Ridge, among them Mora Hensley, the store owner's wife. They stopped at the edge of the clearing, remaining mounted. "Elowyn Pike," Mora called, her voice heavy with self-righteous concern. "We've come to appeal to whatever decency you have left." Elowyn forced herself to step closer, though every instinct told her to run. "You're living in sin," one of the women said bluntly. "Openly and shamelessly, with a heathen savage. Have you no fear for your immortal soul?" "I'm working," Elowyn replied. "Honestly, there's no sin in honest work." Mora laughed, sharp and cruel. "Work? Is that what you call it? We know what kind of work a woman does for a man she isn't married to." "It isn't like that." "Then marry him," one of the younger women snapped. "If it's so innocent, make it proper in the eyes of God and man." "Marry an Indian?" Mora recoiled. "That would be worse. At least now you could repent. Leave. Try to salvage what's left of your reputation." "There's nothing left to salvage," Elowyn said, bitterness surprising even herself. "You made that clear when I was starving in your streets." "Because you're a woman who couldn't keep her husband," Mora shot back. "That should have made you reflect on your own failings, not pile sin upon sin." At that moment, Nakoa stepped out of the cabin, wiping his hands from his work. The women's horses shifted nervously. "Ladies," he said, his voice polite but cold, "you are not welcome here." "We're trying to save her soul," Mora insisted, though she edged her horse back. "Her soul is her own," Nakoa said. "Leave, now." "And if we don't?" one woman sneered. "You'll scalp us?" Nakoa only looked at her. The color drained from her face. "This isn't over," Mora said tightly. "The decent people of Cedar Ridge won't stand by while white women are corrupted and degraded. We'll pray for you, Elowyn. Pray you come to your senses before it's too late." They rode off in a flurry of righteous outrage, leaving Elowyn trembling. "Don't listen to them," Nakoa said quietly. But how could she not? Their words lodged beneath her skin like splinters, festering. That night she barely touched her supper. The harassment grew worse. Every time Nakoa went to town, he returned with new rumors, each uglier than the last. She was a witch who'd ensnared him. She carried his half-breed child. She sold her body for food and shelter. Then came the night visits. The first time, it was only voices in the darkness, shouting filth from the tree line. Nakoa grabbed his rifle, but by the time he stepped outside, the riders were gone. A week later, they returned, throwing rocks at the cabin, whooping like demons. One shattered the small window, glass spraying across the floor. "Ignore them," Nakoa said as he boarded it up. "Cowards, brave only in darkness and numbers." But Elowyn couldn't ignore it. Each incident frayed her nerves, made her flinch at every sound. She found herself watching the trees constantly, waiting. Then came the night that changed everything. Elowyn jolted awake to violent pounding on the door, the whole cabin shaking with the force of it. "Open up!" Garrick Vay's voice barked. "I've got a warrant for the woman, suspicion of theft and prostitution." Nakoa was already on his feet, rifle in hand. "There is no theft here," he said evenly. "No prostitution. Go away." "Can't do that," Vay replied smugly. "I've got legal papers." The storm outside was nothing compared to what now stood at their door. "She comes with us," Garrick Vay shouted, "or we come in and take her." "Show the papers through the window," Nakoa demanded. "I don't have to show you anything, Indian," Vay snapped. "Open this door or we'll break it down." Elowyn Pike pulled her shawl tight around her shoulders, her pulse racing. "Maybe I should go," she whispered. "If they really have papers—" "No papers," Nakoa said firmly. "They're lying. No judge would sign a warrant without proof." The pounding grew louder, heavier. She could hear more voices now, 4, maybe 5 men. "Last chance, Nakoa," Vay called. "Send her out and we leave peaceful. Keep her, and things turn ugly." Nakoa moved to the window, peering out. Elowyn saw his face harden. "They brought rope," he said quietly. The word struck her like a blow. Rope. She knew what that meant. 10 seconds, Vay warned. "Then we come in." Nakoa turned to her, and for the first time she saw fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her. "Back room," he said. "Get in the back room. Bar the door. No matter what you hear, don't come out." "Nakoa." "Go." "Ith." She ran to the tiny back room, barely more than storage, and dropped the bar just as the front door splintered. What followed would live in her nightmares for years. Crashing wood, cursing, the dull, sickening sound of fists meeting flesh. A single rifle shot, then the weapon clattered to the floor. More fighting, furniture breaking. Then, silence. "Where is she?" Vay's voice came, ragged with anger. No answer. "Hit him again. Make him talk." A blow landed. Still Nakoa said nothing. Elowyn clamped her hands over her mouth to keep from crying out. Every instinct screamed at her to run to him, but his words echoed in her head. "Don't come out." "Check the back room," someone said. Footsteps. The handle rattled. "Barred from inside. She's in there." "Elowyn Pike," Vay called smoothly. "Come out now and we'll go easy on you." She didn't move. She barely breathed. "Your Indian can't protect you anymore," he went on. "We've got him tied up good, but he's still breathing. You come out peaceful, he stays that way. Make us work for it." The threat hung in the air. Elowyn closed her eyes. She couldn't let them kill him because of her. Slowly she reached for the bar. Then a new voice cut through the tension. Loud, sharp, commanding. "What in the name of God Almighty is going on here?" Judge Eldrick Voss," Vay stammered, suddenly unsure. "Sir, we were just breaking and entering, from what I see. Assault. And you claim to have a warrant?" "Well, not exactly a warrant, but—" "Then you are here illegally, attacking a man in his own home," the judge snapped. "Cut him loose, now." "But sir, the woman—" "What woman?" Voss interrupted. "I see a man defending his property from criminals. Unless you have legal papers, you are the ones breaking the law." Elowyn heard hurried movement, muttered curses. "This isn't over," Vay growled. "Yes, it is," Judge Voss replied coldly. "Any man I find out here again without proper cause will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Now get out before I arrest every one of you." Only after she heard horses retreating did Elowyn emerge. Nakoa sat slumped on the floor, blood trickling from a cut above his eye, rope burns raw around his wrists. Judge Voss stood in the doorway, an older man with stern features and eyes that missed nothing. You all right, miss? Elowyn nodded, unable to speak, dropping to her knees beside Nakoa. I'll be going now, the judge said quietly. You might consider making certain legal arrangements. It would solve many problems. He tipped his hat and left. Elowyn cleaned Nakoa's wounds with trembling hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. This is all my fault. I'll leave tomorrow. No. His hand closed around hers. You stay. But they'll come back. Then we face them, he said. Together. She looked at him through tears. This man owed her nothing, yet he had stood between her and death, taken a beating rather than give her up. Why? She asked again. This time his answer was different. Because you are not nothing, he said softly. Not a barn rat, not ruined. You are Elowyn. You work hard. You don't complain. You make good coffee. A faint smile touched his bruised mouth. Worth fighting for. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his shoulder, and let herself cry for the first time since arriving. Tears not of despair, but of relief, gratitude, and the fragile beginning of hope. Outside, dawn was breaking. They had survived the night. Whatever came next, they would meet it together, as Nakoa had said. The days after the attack settled into an uneasy calm, the kind that felt like the world holding its breath. Storm clouds stacked just beyond the horizon. Elowyn Pike buried herself in work, determined not to let the memory of that night hollow her out. She found comfort in routine, setting meals to simmer, mending worn seams, learning the skills Nakoa taught her with quiet patience. He began showing her how to work pelts, how to scrape them clean, stretch them true, cure them so they would last. Her first attempts were awkward, her hands unsure, but he never corrected her with words. He simply showed her again, steady hands guiding the blade, calm as winter water. It was during one of those evenings that she noticed his carving had changed. After supper, he would sit by the fire, knife whispering through wood, movements more intent than before. Shapes emerged in the flicker of flame, but she couldn't quite make them out. "What are you making?" she asked one night, curiosity winning out. He glanced up, then held the piece toward her. It was a bird, a small sparrow, wings folded tight, head tucked as if bracing against cold wind. "It's beautiful," Elowyn said, tracing the delicate feathers with her fingertip. "But why a sparrow?" "Small bird, common," he said, taking it back. "People think nothing of it." He studied the carving. "But it survives winter when bigger birds fly south, stronger than it looks." Understanding caught in her throat. He was carving how he saw her, or at least what he believed she could be. As the weeks passed, more figures appeared. A rabbit, coiled and alert. A deer, graceful even in weariness. A lone wolf, proud despite solitude. He never said they were for her, but she found them placed near where she worked, by the wash basin, on the shelf beside her mending, near her sleeping pallet. "You could sell these," she said one day, admiring an eagle carved with astonishing detail. "In town, to traders." He shrugged. "Maybe. Not why I make them. Then why?" For a long moment he said nothing. Then, "My grandfather taught me the wood holds spirits waiting. Carver's job is to find them, set them free." He met her eyes. "Sometimes a person needs to see their spirit outside themselves. Remember what they are." That night, Elowyn studied the carvings by firelight. Each was different, yet all carried the same quiet strength, the same endurance. Was this how Nakoa saw her? Not as the ruined woman Cedar Ridge whispered about, but as something worth patience, worth care? The next morning brought a surprise. Elowen was working the small garden plot Nakoa had helped clear when she heard a horse. Her body tightened, ready to run, but it was only one rider, a woman. She recognized her. Tamsin Rowe, the schoolteacher. Younger than most of the town matrons, perhaps 30, plain-faced but kind. "Miss Pike," Tamsin called, staying mounted. "May I speak with you?" Elowen approached cautiously. "If you've come to save my soul, or tell me to leave—" "I've come to apologize," Tamsin interrupted, "and to warn you." That stopped her. Elowen searched the woman's face for pretense and found only sincerity and fear. "Warn me about what?" Tamsin glanced around. "May we speak inside? I shouldn't be seen here long." After a moment, Elowen nodded. Inside the cabin, she poured coffee. Tamsin didn't waste time. "I was there," she said, "the day you came to town. I saw you begging for work. I saw how they treated you." Her hands twisted together. "I did nothing. I've regretted it every day." "Why didn't you help?" Elowen asked, the question sharper than she meant. "Because I'm a coward," Tamsin said quietly. "Because I need my position. A schoolteacher who shows poor judgment, who associates with the wrong people. She's dismissed in a heartbeat. And then I'd be where you were." Anger flared, then faded. Elowen understood that fear too well. "You said you came to warn me," she prompted. "Yes." Tamsin leaned forward. "There's talk in town, ugly talk. Some of the men, led by Garrick Vey, are saying Nakoa has you under some kind of spell, that you're not responsible for your actions. They want to have you removed for your own good." "Eldrick Voss already stopped them," Elowen said. "The judge is only here twice a month," Tamsin replied. "The rest of the time, Vey and his friends do as they please. They're gathering support. Even people who didn't care before are listening now. They're calling it protection of white womanhood, Christian values." Cold crept through Elowen, despite the warm cup in her hands. "What should I do?" "I don't know," Tamsin admitted. Then she reached into her bag and drew out a small cloth bundle. "I brought this. It isn't much, but—" Inside were needles, good thread, a sharp pair of scissors, and several yards of decent fabric. Elowen looked up, eyes shining, not just with gratitude, but with the knowledge that, in a town full of judgment, one woman had chosen courage. "I can't accept, please," Tamsin Rowe said, rising abruptly. "It doesn't erase my cowardice, but maybe it helps a little." She glanced towards the window. "I should go before someone notices my horse." At the door, she hesitated. "He's a good man, Nakoa. I've watched him trade in town for years. Never cheats. Never stirs trouble, no matter how they treat him." She met Elowen Pike's eyes. "You could do far worse than a man who sees your worth when the rest of the world refuses to." After Tamsin left, Elowen sat for a long time, staring at the sewing supplies in her hands. Such a small kindness, yet it reminded her that Cedar Ridge wasn't made entirely of cruelty. And it sparked an idea. When Nakoa returned from checking his trap lines, she showed him the fabric. "I want to make something," she said. "Something to sell. If I can bring in money, real money, maybe they'll stop seeing me as what they say I am." Nakoa studied her face. "You want their approval?" "I want them to leave us alone," she corrected. "And money talks louder than gossip." He nodded slowly. "What would you make?" "Shirts. Proper ones," she said. "The men in town, their wives don't sew all that well. I noticed torn seams, crooked stitching. I can do better." It was true. Her mother had once insisted she learn fine needlework, back when marriage prospects still mattered. The skill had felt useless then. Now it might be salvation. Nakoa helped her set a workspace near the window where the light fell cleanest. As she worked on the first shirt, he sat nearby carving. This time she could see the shape clearly. A woman bent over her sewing, caught in a moment of focus. "That's me," she said, startled. "Yes." "I don't look afraid." "Because you're not," he replied. "Not when you work. When you work, you remember who you are." She thought about that as the needle flashed in and out of cloth. He was right. While she worked, she wasn't the abandoned wife, the beggar, the fallen woman. She was simply Elowen, making something useful with her own hands. By evening, the first shirt was finished. Straight seams, even stitches, a careful fit. Nakoa examined it with the same attention he gave his carvings. "Good," he said. She saw the approval in his eyes. That night, as they ate, Elowen found herself thinking about Eldrick Voss's words. Legal arrangements. She knew what the judge had meant. Marriage would shield her, make it harder for Garrick Vey and his circle to interfere. Marriage to an Apache. Months ago, the idea would have terrified her. Now she watched Nakoa tend the fire. His careful movements, the quiet strength in everything he did, and remembered his body braced against the door, his refusal to give her up even as they beat him. "Nakoa," she said suddenly, "what did the judge mean about legal arrangements?" He went still, then turned to face her. "You know what he meant." "Yes. But is it even legal? For us to—" "Legal, yes. Accepted, no." He sat across from her. "It could solve problems, or make new ones." "What do you think?" she asked. He was quiet a long time, carving knife resting in his hand. "I think you deserve a man who offers marriage because he wants you, not because the law says it's useful." Heat crept into her cheeks. "And you don't want—" "I didn't say that," he replied, meeting her gaze. "I said you deserve better than protection alone." The air between them thickened. Elowen realized how aware she'd grown of him. The way he moved, the rare smiles that softened his seriousness, the gentleness in his hands despite their strength. "What if it wasn't just for protection?" she whispered. He set the carving down, giving her his full attention. "Then it would be a different question." Before she could answer, the sound of horses cut the night. Many horses, fast. Nakoa was on his feet, reaching for his rifle. "Stay inside," he ordered, moving to the window. Then a voice carried through the dark. One Elowen recognized. Garrick Vey again. And he wasn't alone. "We know you're in there," he called. "Both of you. Come out now and nobody gets hurt." Nakoa checked his rifle, jaw set. "They don't learn." "Wait," Elowen said, an idea forming. "Let me try something." She grabbed the finished shirt and moved to the door before he could stop her. "I'm coming out," she called. "Don't shoot. I'm coming out to talk." She stepped onto the porch, holding the shirt aloft like a flag of truce. In the torchlight, she counted at least 8 men, Vey among them, flanked by several town merchants, watching her with hard, expectant eyes. "Gentlemen," Elowen Pike said, surprised to hear how steady her own voice sounded, "I have a business proposal." The men remained mounted, torches flaring and throwing restless shadows across their faces. Garrick Vey's expression shifted from smug certainty to open confusion as Elowen stepped forward, lifting the neatly folded shirt in her hands. "Business?" Garrick sneered. "The only business here is getting you out of this den of sin." "Look at the shirt," Elowen said, refusing to engage with his insult. She moved fully into the torchlight. "Look at the stitching, the cut, the finish." Despite themselves, several of the men leaned closer. She recognized Rafe Dern, the feed store owner, and Thorne Calder, the blacksmith. Garrick scoffed. "So you can sew. What of it?" "How many of you have wives who struggle with fine needlework?" Elowen pressed on. "How many of you pay high prices to order shirts from Denver or San Francisco?" "We don't need anything from you," one man barked, but Rafe Dern was studying the garment with a merchant's eye. That is solid work, he admitted, reluctant but honest. I'm offering to take orders, Elowin continued. Clear business terms. You get quality clothing, I get honest wages. Nothing more. She's trying to distract you, Garrick snapped. Trying to pull you off why we're here. And what exactly is that? Nakoa's voice came from behind her. He stood in the doorway, rifle held loose but unmistakably ready. Calm. Unyielding. Do you have legal papers this time? Garrick's jaw tightened. We don't need papers to protect a white woman from corruption. I'm not corrupted, Elowin said firmly. I work, I earn my keep, and now I'm offering labor for pay. Since when is honest work a crime? Since you're living in sin with a heathen, someone shouted. Something in Elowin snapped. Weeks of swallowed shame, of silence and fear, burned away. You want to know what real sin looks like, she said, her voice rising. Letting a woman starve in your streets because her husband abandoned her. Turning your backs on someone begging for work because she doesn't carry a man's name to make her respectable. The men shifted uneasily. That's corruption, she went on. Your hearts are so hard you'd rather see me dead than helped by someone you think is beneath you. Watch yourself, Garrick warned. Or what? Elowin shot back. You'll drag me off and beat me like you beat Nakoa? Show everyone what kind of righteous men you really are? A bitter laugh escaped her. You call him savage, but he showed me more decency in one day than your whole town did in a week. Elowin, Nakoa said quietly. A warning, not a command. But Thorn Calder had dismounted. He approached slowly, eyes fixed on the shirt. Let me see that. She handed it to him. He examined it carefully in the torchlight, fingers tracing the seams. Thorn was known for practicality over gossip. This is better than what my wife makes, he said at last, and better than what the traveling merchants sell. Thorn, you can't be serious, Garrick snapped. I need shirts, Thorn replied flatly. Good ones, for church and business. How much? Rafe Dern asked. $2 for fine shirts, Elowin said. $1 for work shirts. Those are Denver prices, someone objected. For Denver quality, Elowin countered, and faster. A murmur rippled through the group. These were merchants, men who understood profit better than moral posturing. This is madness, Garrick said coldly. You're all being fooled. I see a woman who keeps her word, Thorn said, not looking at him. That's more than I can say for some men in Cedar Ridge. The divide was clear now. Prejudice on one side, practicality on the other. I'll take 2, Thorn said. 1 black, 1 gray. Thorn, Garrick began. It's business, Thorn cut in. Nothing more. He turned to Elowin. When can you have them? 2 weeks, she said, scarcely believing the words coming out of her own mouth. I may want some as well, Rafe added slowly. If the quality holds. This is a mistake, Garrick said darkly. You're normalizing sin. Nobody's talking about marriage, Thorn snapped. We're talking about shirts. But Garrick wasn't finished, and the torchlight flickered over faces divided, by fear, by profit, and by a woman who refused to stay silent any longer. He swung his horse until he was facing Elowin Pike head-on. You think you're clever, Garrick Vey said, his voice sharp with spite. But none of this changes a thing. You're still living in sin, still a stain on this community. One way or another, you'll be gone. That's enough. A new voice cut through the night. Judge Eldrick Voss stepped into the torchlight, and Elowin wondered how long he'd been standing in the shadows, listening. Deputy Vey, the judge said coolly, are you threatening these people? Garrick straightened. We're concerned citizens, Your Honor. Citizens who seem to have forgotten that harassment is illegal, Eldrick Voss replied, regardless of your personal opinions. He gestured toward the men. Mr. Thorne Calder wishes to commission shirts. Mr. Rafe Dern is considering the same. That is commerce, not corruption. The judge's gaze settled on Elowin. And as far as I can see, Ms. Pike is employed as a housekeeper and seamstress. Unless you have evidence of criminal activity, I suggest you leave these people to their lawful business. Garrick's face twisted with rage, but he didn't dare challenge the judge outright. This isn't over, he snarled. No, Eldrick Voss agreed pleasantly. It isn't, because if I hear of any more midnight raids on this property, I'll be filing charges. Are we clear? Reluctantly, the group began to break apart. Thorne Calder promised to return in daylight with measurements. Rafe Dern nodded thoughtfully, already calculating costs. As the last horses turned away, the judge lingered. That was well played, Ms. Pike, he said. But Deputy Vey is right about one thing. This isn't finished. He'll look for other ways to cause trouble. Then what should we do? Elowin asked. The judge glanced between her and Nakoa. What I suggested before still stands. Legal protection has its advantages. He tipped his hat. Good evening to you both. After he left, Elowin and Nakoa remained in the doorway, watching the torchlights fade into darkness. You took a big risk, Nakoa said quietly. I'm tired of being afraid, Elowin replied. Tired of letting them shame me for surviving. He studied her for a moment. You spoke well, like a warrior. I didn't feel like one, she admitted. I was terrified. The best warriors are, he said. Fear makes you careful. Careful keeps you alive. They went back inside. The cabin felt different now, steadier, as if her defiance had thickened the walls. Elowin picked up the fabric Tamsin Rowe had brought, already planning seams and cuts. Will they really let me work? She asked. Or will Garrick find a way to stop it? Some will trade, Nakoa said. Men like Calder care about quality and profit. Others, he shrugged. Hate feeds Garrick. He won't stop easily. Elowin turned the cloth between her fingers. About what the judge said? About legal protection? Nakoa met her gaze. You want protection? I want... She paused, searching for words. When I stood up to them tonight, you were behind me, not speaking for me, not shielding me like I was weak. Just there. Solid. She looked straight at him. I've never had that. Someone who believes I'm strong enough to fight, but stays close in case I need them. You are strong, Nakoa said simply. I saw it the day I met you. Broken down, yes, but not broken. Like a bird with a wounded wing, he went on. Needs time, then it flies again. Is that why you helped me? She asked softly. Because you saw something worth saving? No. He stepped closer, his eyes steady. I helped because it was right. I stayed because... He hesitated. Because you look at me and don't see a savage. You see Nakoa. And you don't see a ruined woman? Elowin asked. You see Elowin? Not ruined, he said firmly. Never ruined. Hurt, yes. Lost for a time. But fire doesn't ruin gold. It proves it. Tears stung her eyes. I'm not gold. Yes, he said. Just Elowin. That's enough. The air between them felt alive with possibility. Elowin thought again of the judge's words, but now not only of protection, of partnership, of home. If we... She stopped, then tried again. If we married, it wouldn't be just for safety. Not for me. Nakoa was very still. What would it be for? For mornings, working side by side. For evenings by the fire. For someone who sees me and doesn't turn away. She drew a breath. For love, though I hardly dare say that word yet. Love grows, Nakoa said quietly. Like plants in a garden, needs tending, patience, time. His voice softened. But the roots are already there, waiting for spring. It wasn't a fiery declaration, not the kind sung about in ballads, but somehow it felt truer than that. It was a promise of room to grow, of something living that could take root if it was tended right. So, is that a yes? Elowyn Pike asked, a small smile tugging at her mouth. Is that a proper proposal? Nakoa countered. She laughed softly, pleased to see the answering smile crease his usually solemn face. I suppose it isn't. Then how do Apache people propose? Different ways, he said, but always with a gift, something made, hunted, or grown. Shows care, shows ability to provide. Elowyn glanced around the cabin, the pelts from his hunts, the vegetables stored from his garden, the carvings shaped by his hands. Then her eyes fell to the shirt she still held. Then I'll make you something, she said with sudden certainty. The finest shirt in the territory, and when it's finished, I'll ask you properly. Nakoa nodded, accepting it as naturally as breath. Then I will answer properly. They stood there a moment, two people who had found each other on the edges of respectability, discovering that the margins could be a place not of exile, but of freedom. Outside, the night still carried judgment and threat. Inside, there was warmth, work, and the quiet understanding that broken things could be mended and made stronger at the seams. Elowyn gathered her needle and thread. She would finish the orders for Thorn Calder and Rafe Dern, prove herself as a tradeswoman. But first she would make Nakoa's shirt. Every stitch would be a promise, every seam a declaration that she was no longer hiding, no longer ashamed. She was exactly where she belonged. By November, the wind howled like a living thing. For 3 days a storm had raged, sealing the world outside in white silence. Snow piled high against the cabin walls, and ice rattled the reinforced windows. Elowyn worked by lamplight, her fingers steady over fine linen purchased with her first real earnings. Nakoa's shirt lay nearly finished across her lap. She had taken her time, hours on each seam, every buttonhole perfect. It was the best work she had ever done. Practical, durable, yet marked by quiet elegance. The storm's worsening, Nakoa said, adding wood to the fire. Ice crystals clung to his hair from checking the animals. We have enough supplies, Elowyn said, looking up. Yes, planned for this. He sat opposite her, antler carving in hand. Early storm, but not unexpected. The silence between them felt easy now, wrapped in warmth. Elowyn found herself watching how the firelight played over his face, how precise his hands were. What are you making? She asked. He held it up. A hair comb. Wedding gift. Her needle stilled. Whose wedding? His gaze met hers. Steady, sure. Ours. When you ask properly. Heat rose in her cheeks, but she smiled. Presumptuous. Practical, he corrected. Storm gives time. Time to prepare. They worked on as the wind shrieked outside. At last, Elowyn tied off the final thread and lifted the shirt. It's finished. Nakoa set aside his carving and examined it closely, fingers tracing collar and cuffs with reverence. Very fine. Not too fine for you, she said, standing and holding it against his chest. For the man who gave me shelter when the world turned away, who taught me I wasn't ruined, just tested. A sudden crash outside made them both turn, likely a branch giving way under snow. Nakoa started towards the rifle. Then they heard voices, faint, urgent. That's Tamsin Rowe, Elowyn said. The schoolteacher. Nakoa opened the door cautiously. Tamsin stumbled inside, half frozen, supporting another woman, young, heavily pregnant, barely conscious. Please, Tamsin gasped. She needs help. The baby's coming. They moved at once. Nakoa carried the woman to Elowyn's pallet by the fire, while Elowyn pulled blankets free. "Who is she?" Elowyn asked. "Bryn Hale," Tamsin said, teeth chattering. "Orrin Blackwell's daughter. Her husband died last month in a mining accident. When her father learned she was with child, he said she must have sinned before marriage. He cast her out." Cold anger settled in Elowyn's chest. The same reverend who had turned her away. "I've been hiding her," Tamsin whispered. "But the storm, I had nowhere else to go." Elowyn tightened the blankets around Bryn Hale and met Nakoa's eyes. "You came to the right place," she said. Tamsin Rowe went on, her voice tight with cold and fear. "But she went into labor. I couldn't deliver a baby alone, and no one in town would help. They said she made her choices. They said it wasn't their problem." She swallowed hard. "I remembered you. I thought you wouldn't turn us away." "You thought right," Elowyn Pike said without hesitation. "Nakoa, we need hot water, clean cloths, plenty of both." As Nakoa moved at once, Bryn Hale's eyes fluttered open. "No," she whispered weakly. "I can't. The scandal, it'll ruin you too." "Hush," Elowyn said gently, kneeling beside her. "You're safe here. We're going to help you. And your baby." The hours that followed were grueling. Elowyn had helped with births before, back when she still had a place in the world. But never like this. The storm howled outside, wind clawing at the walls, while another kind of storm tore through Bryn's body. Tamsin surprised them all with her steadiness, following Elowyn's instructions without question. Nakoa kept the fire roaring, the water hot, moving with calm purpose. His quiet presence anchored the room. "I'm scared," Bryn whispered between contractions. "We're here," Elowyn said firmly. "You're not alone." "They said I'm cursed," Bryn sobbed, "that my baby will be marked by sin." "The only mark your child will have," Elowyn said fiercely, "is that he's loved. Anyone who says otherwise is a fool." Near dawn, as the storm finally began to loosen its grip, Bryn's son came into the world, healthy, strong, and loud. "He's beautiful," Tamsin breathed, as Elowyn cleaned the baby and wrapped him in warm cloth. Bryn wept as she held her son. "I have nothing," she said brokenly. "No home, no family, no way to care for him." Elowyn looked to Nakoa. No words passed between them, only understanding. He gave a small nod. "You have shelter here as long as you need," Elowyn said. "The barn's warm and dry. We can fix it proper. You're a widow, not a sinner, and your boy deserves a chance." "But people will talk," Bryn whispered. "They already do," Elowyn replied. "Hasn't killed us yet." Tamsin watched them in quiet awe. "You'd really do this? Take in a stranger and her baby?" "Someone once took me in when I was a stranger," Elowyn said, glancing at Nakoa. "Seems only right to pass that kindness on." They spent the day making arrangements. Nakoa and Tamsin turned the barn into a livable shelter, solid and warm. Elowyn tended to Bryn and the baby, making sure both were recovering well. As evening fell, Tamsin prepared to leave. "I need to be back before they notice I'm gone," she said. "But I'll come when I can. I'll bring supplies." "Be careful," Elowyn warned. "If they learn I helped," Tamsin said, lifting her chin, "I'll face it. I'm tired of being a coward. Watching you stand up to them, build a life anyway, it's changed me." After she left, Elowyn found Nakoa outside, surveying the storm's damage. "Big decision," he said, taking them in. "Are you angry?" Elowyn asked. "I should have asked first." "Not angry," he replied, turning to her. "Proud." She smiled faintly. "We'll have a full household now. A cast-out widow and her baby, an Apache man, and a fallen woman. What will they say?" "Let them talk," Nakoa said, a rare smile touching his face. "We know the truth. Good people helping each other. Nothing shameful in that. That night, while Bryn and her son slept safely in the barn, Elowyn and Nakoa sat by the fire. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside clean and white. "I have something for you," Elowyn said, retrieving the shirt she had made. "My proposal gift." Nakoa accepted it solemnly, studying every seam. "Very fine work. Work of a woman who takes pride in who she's making it for," Elowyn corrected softly. He set the shirt aside with care, then brought out his own gift, the antler comb, now finished. Delicate flowers and vines were carved along its length, polished until it gleamed. "For your hair," he said, "when we stand before the judge." Elowyn took it with trembling hands. "It's beautiful." "You haven't asked yet," Nakoa reminded her. She set the comb down and took his hands in hers, calloused, strong, and gentle all at once. "Nakoa," she said formally, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Will you marry me? Not for protection. Not for propriety," Elowyn Pike continued softly, her voice steady. "But because you showed me that what's been broken can be repaired, because you see me clearly and don't look away, because I want to face whatever comes, with you at my side." "Yes," Nakoa answered without hesitation. "I will marry you, Elowyn Pike, because you are strong like the mountains, because you see Nakoa, not just an Apache, because winter is warmer when you are here." They sat in silence, fingers intertwined, the fire popping low between them. Outside, Asa's cry lifted briefly into the night, then faded as he settled again, new life breathing in the heart of winter, hope standing firm against hardship. "When?" Elowyn asked at last. "Soon," Nakoa replied. "Before another storm comes. Judge Eldrick Voss returns next week." "People will be furious," she said. "Garrick Vey, the others." "Yes," he agreed. "They will cause trouble. But we face it together. You, me, Bryn Hale, her son. We make our own family, our own way." Elowyn considered the household taking shape around them, cast-offs, all of them, and yet stronger together than any of them had ever been alone. "Let them rage," she said finally. "We'll be too busy living to listen." Nakoa squeezed her hands gently. "This is a good decision." "No regrets?" he asked. "None," Elowyn answered. "Only gratitude, for the storm that brought me to your door, for your kindness that saved me, for this chance to build something new." The wind had stilled completely, leaving the world hushed and white. Tomorrow would bring trials, Bryn's recovery, the town's reaction, preparations for the wedding, but tonight, with warmth around them, new life sleeping nearby, and promises spoken, Elowyn felt something she hadn't known in years. Peace. She was no longer running, no longer ashamed, no longer alone. She was home, and soon she would be wife to a man who offered partnership, not possession. The storm had passed, leaving behind not ruin, but change. A family formed by choice, not blood, tempered by hardship, made stronger for surviving it together. Dawn broke sharp and clear on Elowyn's wedding day. She stood at the window, watching sunlight turn the snow-draped mountains to gold. In 3 days, everything had shifted. News of the coming marriage had swept through Cedar Ridge like fire through dry grass, and the response had been swift. "They're coming," Nakoa said quietly behind her. She saw them then, riders moving through the pale morning mist. Garrick Vey rode at the front, flanked by Orrin Blackwell and a cluster of town men. "How many?" she asked. 12, maybe 15. Bryn stepped out from the barn, Asa bundled tight against the cold. "I should leave," she said. "This is because of me, too." "You stay," Elowyn said firmly. "We face them together." Nakoa checked his rifle. then set it aside. "No guns," he said. "Not today." She understood. Today was for joining, not bloodshed. Eowyn smoothed her dress, not the white gown she once imagined, but the sturdy wool dress Nakoa had bought her, clean and mended with her own careful stitches. The riders stopped at the edge of the property. Vey dismounted, his face carved with righteous fury. "Eowyn Pike," he called, "we're giving you one last chance to see sense." She stepped onto the porch, Nakoa at her side, Bryn just behind. "State your business, deputy," Eowyn said calmly. "You know our business," Vey snapped. "This abomination ends today. Living in sin was bad enough. Now you want to legalize it? Mix your blood with his, and shelter a fallen woman and her bastard?" Orrin Blackwell shoved forward. "Bryn, come home. Repent. Give the child to a proper family, and forgiveness can still be found." "There's nothing to forgive," Bryn said, her voice stronger than Eowyn had ever heard. "I was married before God. My son was conceived in wedlock. You cast me out for your pride, not his law." Silence fell. Blackwell's face darkened with rage. "You dare!" "I dare speak the truth," Bryn cut in. "Something you forgot how to do." "That's enough," Vey growled. "We're not here to debate scripture. Eowyn Pike, will you abandon this madness?" Eowyn felt Nakoa's steady presence beside her, Bryn's quiet courage at her back. And she knew, without doubt, she would not yield. She thought of every frozen night, every door shut in her face, every back turned without mercy. Then she thought of warmth, of being seen, of dignity returned. "No," Eowyn Pike said, her voice steady. "I will not." "Then you leave us no choice," Garrick Vey snapped, motioning to Vey's circle. "We'll remove you by force for your own good." "Try it." Another voice cut through the tension. Judge Eldrick Voss stepped into the light. And he was not alone. With him stood Thorne Calder, Rafe Dern, and, unexpectedly, Tamsin Rowe. Behind them rolled a wagon driven by an elderly woman Eowyn didn't recognize at first. "Gentlemen," the judge said mildly, "I heard there might be trouble this morning. I thought I'd arrive early for the wedding." "What wedding?" Vey snarled. "You can't possibly mean—" "I do," Judge Voss replied evenly, "and I will. The law is clear. Any man and woman of legal age may marry, regardless of race. You may dislike it, deputy, but your feelings do not outrank the law." "It's unnatural," someone shouted. "Against God's design." "Funny," the elderly woman said, climbing down from the wagon with Tamsin's help. "I've read the Bible for 70 years, and I don't recall God ever asking for our permission." Eowyn recognized her then. Verea Knox, the sharp-tongued widow who lived on the edge of town. "Mrs. Knox," Orrin Blackwell said stiffly, "surely you don't approve." "Of what?" Verea cut in. "A woman choosing marriage over starvation? A man showing mercy when so-called Christians wouldn't?" She snorted. "Seems the only unnatural thing here is how cruel folks get while hiding behind God's name." "This is absurd," Vey barked. "Thorne, Rafe, you can't support this." Thorne shrugged. "I came for a wedding, and to collect my shirts. Business is business." "And I brought fabric," Rafe added. "Figured Miss Eowyn, soon to be Mrs. Pike, might want to expand her seamstress work." Tears burned Eowyn's eyes. Not everyone had come to condemn. Some came to stand with her. Others, at least, to deal fairly. It was more than she had dared to hope. "You'll regret this," Vey warned. "When half-breed children run wild and rot spreads through Cedar Ridge." "The only rot I see," Judge Voss said sharply, "is in hearts that choose hate over humanity. Now, unless you have legal grounds to stop this ceremony, I suggest you leave. The wedding proceeds at noon." For a moment, violence hung thick in the air. Vey's hand twitched toward his gun. Eowyn felt Nakoa tense beside her. Then Verea Knox spoke again. Deputy, you're outnumbered. Maybe not in guns, but in conscience. You really want to spill blood over a wedding?" Slowly, grudgingly, Vey stepped back. "This isn't over," he muttered, the threat thin now. One sign he turned savage. "You will do nothing," Judge Voss said coldly, "unless you'd like charges for harassment and intimidation of a territorial judge. My patience has limits." The riders shifted, uncertain, then drifted away. Orrin Blackwell paused, staring at Bryn Hale, who stood in the barn doorway holding Asa. "You are dead to me," he said flatly. "I've been dead to you since you chose pride over love," Bryn replied calmly. "But I'm alive here, Father. More alive than I ever was under your roof." He rode away without another word. As the dust settled, Elowen found herself surrounded by the strangest wedding party imaginable. Viraya Knox took charge immediately, directing Tamsin to prepare a wedding breakfast. Thorne and Rafe spoke with Nakoa as equals, discussing orders and delivery like any other business. "Well," Judge Voss said at last, smiling faintly, "shall we proceed? I believe vows are waiting." The ceremony was simple, held in the main room of the cabin. Elowen wore Nakoa's carved comb in her hair. Nakoa wore the shirt she had made with her own hands. Bryn stood witness, Asa sleeping peacefully in her arms. Tamsin stood nearby, risking her position to be there. Viraya Knox claimed the best chair, nodding approval throughout. "Do you, Elowen Pike," Judge Voss asked, "take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do," Elowen answered, clear and unwavering. "And do you, Nakoa, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," he said, his deep voice filling the room. "Then by the authority vested in me by the territory," the judge declared, "I pronounce you husband and wife." Nakoa kissed her gently, not with hunger, but with promise. Something settled deep inside Elowen then. Not just safety, not merely shelter, but belonging. The wedding breakfast that followed was simple and full of quiet joy. Viraya Knox held court after the vows, spinning tales of Cedar Ridge's earliest winters, back when grit mattered more than skin and neighbors survived by leaning on one another. Thorne Calder and Rafe Dern talked numbers with Nakoa, placing fresh orders for shirts and asking about leatherwork as if this were any ordinary business day. Tamsin Rowe cradled Asa so Bryn Hale could sit and finish the first proper meal she'd had in days. When the sun climbed high, coats were pulled on and goodbyes said. "There will be talk," Tamsin warned softly. "Consequences." "There always are," Elowen Pike answered. "We'll handle them." Viraya pressed a small purse into Elowen's palm. "A wedding gift, and an order. 2 winter dresses. My hands don't do fine stitching like they used to." "Thank you," Elowen whispered, overwhelmed. "Don't thank me," Viraya said briskly. "Live well. That's the best answer to small minds." After the last wagon rolled away, Elowen and Nakoa stood in the doorway, watching rose and gold spill across the mountains. "No regrets?" Nakoa asked. "None," Elowen said. He lifted a brow, then smiled. "One regret," he teased. "Should have married you sooner." She laughed and leaned into his steady warmth. Bryn stepped out from the barn, with Asa bundled close. "What now?" she asked. "Now we work," Elowen said. "We build. We prove them wrong, not with arguments, but with lives. And the house," Nakoa added quietly. Elowen blinked. "What house?" He pointed to a level stretch beyond the cabin. "Spring comes, we build. Bigger place. Room enough." His eyes flicked to Bryn and the baby. "For family." Tears slipped free, from begging for a corner of a barn to planning a real home, from shame to chosen kin. "Yes," Elowen said, "we build." As night settled on her wedding day, Elowen Pike, her name worn with pride, sat by the fire beside her husband, their unlikely family close. The world beyond might bristle at their choices, but inside there was warmth, purpose, and hope. She had asked for work and shelter. Nothing more. She'd been given dignity, love, and a future. The barn she once pleaded to sleep in had become Bryn's refuge. The cabin that saved her would soon grow into a proper home. "Mercy isn't sin," Eowyn murmured, remembering the words that had steadied her weeks before. "Fire isn't shame." "No," Nakoa agreed softly. "They're the start of life. Real life." And so it was. On society's edges, in defiance of prejudice, a family took root, bound not by blood, but by choice. A place where the cast out were welcomed, where strength meant kindness, and love crossed lines others insisted on drawing. The fire crackled, the baby cooed, and Eowyn smiled. She was home. "Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for being here, and letting this story live within your heart. If it moved you, I hope you'll walk beside us through more journeys of the Wild West, stories filled with truth, endurance, and grace. Subscribe, share your thoughts, and stay close. Together, we'll keep riding across these wide-open lands of memory and hope. Thank you. Aviso legal. Disclaimer. Our narratives bring inspiration from the past, recreated with fictional and dramatized interpretations for entertainment purposes only. AI tools serve as creative support, but the storytelling, editing, and emotional refinement are handled by our team to guarantee authenticity. We comply with content policies for AI use, avoiding impersonations, identity fabrication, or historically misleading images. All visual and audio content is legally sourced. Redistribution or modification requires prior written approval. Thank you for honoring creativity, collaboration, and storytelling done with heart.